welcome to our program. My name is Steve Boyce, and I'll be your host for our segment today. So excited to be with you. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here for today's very exciting program, where we're going to be talking with Leslie Bailey about parallel events, hybrid events, and strategies for engaging your audiences to drive the most value. So let's go ahead and bring on our very special guest, Leslie Bailey. Leslie, welcome to our program. Great to have you with us today.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this.
So nice to have you with us, Leslie. Leslie is the Executive Director of Client Success with beedance. Leslie, why don't you share with our audience just a little bit about what you do for beedance and maybe a little bit of your background in events?
Sure. So I've actually been in events for about 13 years. I kind of fell into it. I started with virtual events and learning how to put those on. I also moved into on-site events as well, doing education sessions and on-air talent for interviews, and then moved back into digital when COVID hit. So I have experience in everything events, primarily with digital, just because it's been so front and center in the past couple of years. At beedance, what I do is I work with a lot of our engagement directors to make sure they have everything they need to successfully project manage any event or any project we have coming in. I also work with clients on their strategy, that goes from engagement to product management to production, in order to make sure they have the most successful, satisfactory event for their attendees that they can.
Wonderful. Well, Leslie, it's clear to me we have the right person today for our topic about parallel and hybrid events and really engaging your audiences. Now, certainly we've all come through a couple of really difficult years in stakeholder engagement. Of course, we're talking about the implications of the COVID pandemic and other things that have come about during the past couple of years. Love to get your view, Leslie, on the importance of engagement, right? Even though we're going through a lot of changes, do you still feel that it's important for organizations to engage with their audiences through multiple means?
Yes. So we'll take a silver lining out of the pandemic. It made a lot of people who were against digital and thinking that it was secondary, really bring it to the surface, that they really needed it in their programs. So engagement's always going to be there, whether it's people who prefer on-site or in a digital component. You have to have it, because if they're not engaging with your content or your speakers, they're not going to be lifelong subscribers to your brand, your messages, your themes. They're going to be very disengaged, to be honest. So it always has to be something you're looking at. And it should be, right? Because that's what makes an interesting session. If I'm not engaged with you, or I don't care about what you're talking about, there's no content to create. There's nothing to continue your organization's message or the education you want to put out there. So the good thing about this, even though that was not a great thing that happened to all of us, is that it really did bring to light what we need to focus on and what we haven't been focusing on, which for some people might have been engagement. So it's very important. And now there's so many new ways and new innovations and ideas that we're seeing of how people are bringing engagement in. So that really helps us, actually, because it also kind of forced all of us to collaborate together and really listen to our audiences about what they're looking for, because now more than ever, they are more opinionated and they have more expectations on how you are going to really hit every engagement button they want.
Fantastic, Leslie. I love your overview of what we've been through. And most importantly, I love your sunny optimism, right? That, hey, it was a difficult time, but let's try to take away some real learnings and some positivity. Now, I want to come back to a couple of things you talked about in terms of engagement. Do you think that show organizers, event organizers, learned something about digital engagement through the past 2 years and the importance of offering a digital experience to those members of their community who, for whatever reason, might not be able to attend an in-person event?
Yeah, so I think we learned a lot. For the people that kind of thought of their digital component as just a secondary afterthought option, they now realize it's the only option they have, and that they had during the pandemic. So that's something that they probably looked at all the platforms that were out there, because if you think about it, a lot of people would go out to RFP, maybe 2 or 3 platforms would hit on that, but now there's so many of them. It's a huge list. So it really made them look at technology, the resources they had. I think we're looking at a lot of the team roles we had, because we probably didn't have them before. If we really weren't expecting a big digital component to our actual program, we're focusing so much on site, we may not have had the skill sets and everything we needed to actually put on the digital or the hybrid component to that. So it really did, I think, educate a lot of people on looking further into their skill sets, and they might have had them on staff already and asking people what exactly they could do or how they could really, throw in some more ideas on how they could have a digital component. So it forced us to look at our teams, our resources, and what technologies we already had in place. The second item to that is if you didn't have a technology in place, it made you look into all those platforms and seek help outside of that, which I've experienced it many times. All those virtual platforms were willing to help, and they really wanted to actually work with people on their strategies as well, not just selling you the technology piece and having you figure out the rest later. They have people on staff expertise who can help you with that. So I think it forced us to look at all of the elements of a digital event that we weren't actually looking at before. We were just looking at how it can make an extension out of our on-site event.
Fantastic. Well, and hopefully for those organizations who took advantage of that opportunity, they've been able to advance the skill sets of their team and create more capabilities internally to deliver more valuable digital programs for their community. You talked about strategies for engagement, Leslie, and I'm curious, based on your experience and the clients that you worked with over the past couple of years, did organizations learn anything about how to engage with a digital audience? And is it the same as producing programs to engage with an in-person audience, or are these two very different things?
So that's a tricky question, because I could say some people learned and some people didn't, because I think we're still seeing some people doing their same program. For an example, a lot of people see engagement as having a hybrid and having an in-room moderator who's looking at a chat and asking your questions. It's not exactly engagement for some people, because I've been that in-room moderator where I get a question that makes zero sense, and then I have to ask that person to elaborate and riff while they're elaborating, and I'm still asking the speaker the question. So that's not exactly the best engagement piece you want, and some people are still going with that. Whereas you can have so many different options now, and I think some people have learned that, and they've actually opened it up to different volunteers or members in their organization that are open to being that kind of engagement piece, that person that kind of bridges those two audiences together. So I think some people saw that. They obviously were surveying their audiences also, asking what worked for them and what didn't. And it's now bringing that piece that didn't work. So they're kind of looking at the program and redesigning it. So I want to say a lot of people did learn. I know some people did, that I personally know. I can't speak for everybody, but I think it really brings together what you're doing in the hybrid and then what newer programs you can design. And before I go any further, I will tell everybody, because I'm sure some people misinterpreted what I just said. You're not creating multiple programs. You're still doing your one program. It's just these different experiences that you're going to kind of branch off to with your one program.
Very intriguing. And that's a great segue, Leslie, to move into our next topic here. I know folks watching this session and listening to your perspectives are grappling with, a lot of event organizers are grappling with, okay, now that the pandemic is largely behind us, fingers crossed, can we go back to in-person? Do I still need a digital or virtual component to my event? I think there's a lot of questions out there about just what type of structure or modality is right going forward, right? So let's get into this a little bit. I know you've brought some materials with you to help our audience understand the differences between hybrid events. We've heard that term for a number of years now, versus parallel events, which is, at least for me, a brand new term. So why don't we start there with some definitions and make sure our audience knows what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I did bring along some visuals because this is so new to everybody that we want to give these to everyone, have you take a look at them and interpret them for your own strategy how you will. So let's start with the first definitions. Everybody knows what a hybrid is, or maybe you don't, so we'll explain what a hybrid is first. That's a mix of your on-site and a digital component that you offer to your multiple audiences. Most people see that as just an extension of their on-site, where they're just streaming as many as they can. There's some interaction, but not much. Whereas the parallel event is something that you can design from the ground up. So you take your one program that you've already designed for on-site, but you're looking at the different experiences that someone can have. So as opposed to me running a hybrid where I stream, let's say 6 to 8 hours of content that I'm expecting you to watch. You may not have that time in your day to do that. Where now I can design a parallel event that maybe has 3 to 4 sessions that you can watch, but also has different pieces of engagement that you can still have and still have that connection to that on-site, but you're not having to really stay logged in the entire day or days in some cases when you have multiple day events. So the difference there is your hybrid is something that you're always going to have in place. It's streaming, it's recording, it's on a virtual platform that people have access to. But a parallel event is taking pieces from that program and being able to emit different engagement experiences for different audience types.
Wonderful. This is helping me so much, and I believe that it's probably helping our audience as well. And one of the things I really like, and I'd like you to expand a little bit further on, is these are different experiences. It's okay that they're different, right? I always sort of felt like in a hybrid, you had to strive to deliver the same experience to every participant. And I think a lot of organizations found that very, very difficult. So it's okay that a parallel event is different for the virtual audience than the in-person audience?
Yes. So, and that was true of a hybrid. People expected you to be delivering the same, and it's not. I mean, I can even say that as when I was a project manager and event producer, it's not the same thing. It's never going to be the same thing because facial expressions, looking around at people around you in an in-room setting, you're not going to have online. Jokes are going to fail. Let's be real. Every joke has failed that any speaker has ever tried to extend to a digital audience. So you were thinking it had to be the same. And that's where expectations weren't being met, which now it's set up so nicely for you because you can set those expectations ahead of time of what that experience is going to be. And it's all in the marketing. If you think about it, a lot of times when we marketed our hybrid as being the same exact thing, you just can't be there in person. Whereas now you can market it any way you want to. It's got so many different pieces that you can market. And that was our problem before. We were trying to make it that extension for anybody who couldn't travel, who couldn't come. But now it's a whole different world with that because you are designing this. You are telling them what to expect. And in some cases, they can choose their own adventure. They can choose the sessions or the engagement pieces they do. And they're setting their own expectations in that right as well.
I love that. Reminds me of those children's books where you could always pick the path that seemed most exciting to you. And why wouldn't we want to create the opportunity for people to have a personalized journey, right? And to choose those experiential elements that bring the most value to them. I love how you talk about expectations and how the expectations for hybrid were very, very different. And I think a lot of people were disappointed by some hybrid delivery. But it feels like with parallel, you've got more degrees of freedom. And you can actually set different expectations for your virtual audience so that they're not going to be disappointed that it's not everything the in-person experience might be.
Yeah. And in our second visual, we kind of show the different characteristics of a parallel versus a hybrid. So like I've said before, a hybrid is very much thought of as an extension of your on-site, whereas your parallel, it's a different sort of event. And everybody, I think, is getting a little scared at the new term because they think they're going to have to create two programs. That's not what they're doing. You're taking from what you want from your one program that has already been designed. So I think that's been kind of the hesitancy and the scary part is thinking that now you have to have more resources to create a second additional program, which is not true. You do have to be a little bit more creative, but that's the fun part. And that's where your audience can come in if you're surveying them and give you ideas about what they want to see and what they haven't seen. Because if you can hit on something that they haven't seen, that opens a brand new door for content, follow-up content pieces, follow-up sessions that maybe you haven't been including in your event. So just those characteristics are so different because it sounds like the same thing, but it's actually not because you're hybrid. And I speak for myself when I say this, I won't speak for everybody. As an attendee of some hybrids, the digital audience has been an afterthought. It's just that, we'll put this online. They can see it. That's enough. That's not enough for them. They want to be able to talk to their colleagues who went in person about what they saw, what they didn't see, and compare those experiences. And we've said it before, you want to open the door to share, not compare. Comparing is the enemy of your hybrid because you're always going to have somebody who was dissatisfied with their experience because a colleague came back and told them all these great things they saw on site, and they met this person and this person, and then they're feeling like their experience is lacking. So you really want to look and kind of review those characteristics that are different of a parallel and a hybrid.
That's wonderful. Share, not compare. I think that's, again, a really optimistic and positive view. I'm really excited for event owners and show organizers to learn from you today, Leslie, that we really aren't creating two separate events, because I think there's a lot of concern out there that I'm going to have to do twice as much work. It's creating two events. I don't have the staff or the bandwidth for that, right, is what I'm hearing a lot. So I think you relieved a lot of anxiety today by suggesting, the parallel event doesn't have to be a completely separate double time type of an experience. And I love the way you've laid out those characteristics. I think it really draws home the distinction, the comparison, right, between those two different things. I'd love to roll into maybe a layer deeper with that, if we could. As we think about those characteristics, how does that kind of manifest itself then into an in-person program or a parallel, as we were thinking about the activities, for example, that the participants might be going through?
So if you think about the activities, and that can be tricky, and that's where I'm saying you have to get creative. And again, look into your own staff for some of that creativity, because you might be able to already find it, and it can be incorporated in your session. Bring your speaker along as well. Let them know what exactly you're planning to do with a parallel event. Explain to them what the parallel event is, because in some cases your speakers are not going to know what you're talking about right off the bat. So bring them along on that journey, because they might actually be able to give you engagement ideas, and they might want to participate. I always tell people the first question when you are looking at speakers is ask them how much they're willing to participate with a digital audience, because that's going to be, for one, very telling about what they're looking for with engagement. And it's also going to help them extend their brand and their message. That's the most important thing that I think sometimes speakers miss, is don't discount this digital audience. They could be your biggest advocates. And if you engage with them, they're going to remember that experience, and they want that. So when you're thinking about that and engagement pieces, think about it in regards of time. Let's talk about time first. So on the third visual that we have, and it's the final one for anybody who thinks it's getting visual heavy, is think of it in time. So if you're really looking at a shorter program for a parallel event, almost cut it in half. It does sound like you're cutting out a lot of program or content, but you're not, because think about this. You can use that as follow-up content or on-demand content to keep that engagement journey going. So when we look at a parallel event, we think about, let's say, 3 hours of streaming. That's pretty doable for most people in their day. It doesn't have to be back to back. You can keep them coming back. That's really up to you on knowing your audience and thinking if they want something concurrent, if they want it back to back, or if they like to take breaks, kind of review, digest that content, and they'll come back in later parts of the day. So you want to think about your audience types and what they typically like to do. So if you have 3 hours of streaming content, let's say 30 to 60 minutes each session, it's pretty doable as well. And if they have access to virtual Q&A, that's where you can still have that connection to the on-site or the in-person room audience, is if they have that kind of chat, that QA system that they normally have, and they can submit questions ahead of time. That's an idea I always throw out there to event organizers, is open it up to them to be able to submit their questions ahead of time. I know it's a little bit hard because they may not know the session content. They may not be very familiar with it. So it's hard to submit questions ahead of time. But if they do have that option, it does feel like you're giving them more room to craft their experience as well. So those are some characteristics of that agenda. And then think of interactive resources. So idea generating activities from sessions, whether that's the speaker themselves or maybe a team representative that they have that knows the content inside and out like they do, be able to have those idea generating activities, whether that's brain dates. We see brain dates a lot with a lot of events on site, or having them just have breakout rooms after the fact, but have it be a structured activity. Don't leave it to an open chat. Awkward silences and crickets are the worst things you want for an engagement activity. And we've all seen it. We've all been there. And it's something people want structure, but they want choice. So while that sounds like two different things, it's actually the same thing that you can build and craft upon, is have a structure, but have it be a little bit free to where if they have different ideas or people have different creativity and brainstorming they want to do, they have the room to do that, but it's still structured. And then think of bonus things you can add for them, like extra CEs, if that's doable. I'm not a CE expert, so anybody can correct me on that if that's not a thing. But extra CEs or even membership points for those of you that are associations and have members for participating in these activities. They do need motivation to do these. So that's what you want to think about when you're crafting those engagement experiences. And then breakout opportunities, we've talked about those. Being able to schedule networking meetings ahead of time, just like you would do in an app when you're going on site, is something that can be very, very interesting to them, but also the option to not only schedule those meetings with other digital attendees, but also with people on site. You can do a virtual brain date. We obviously are doing it right now. So it's just something that you want to think about. And then looking at those resources. Designing a parallel event isn't going to take you any more resources than it would a hybrid. It's probably going to actually take you less than a hybrid event. So just throwing that out there for anybody who's still on the fence about it, really think about it. You probably don't need a lot of extra resources for that. And then your estimated total attendee time is about 3 to 5 hours versus a 6 to 8 hour day. That, let's be honest, even if people love your event, they are not looking forward to a 6 to 8 hour day on the computer watching sessions. So that's just kind of an overview of how you could craft it, what that agenda looks like, as opposed to a hybrid.
That is wonderful, Leslie. I really appreciate you walking through that example of the content components, the duration of the experience, the way to generate interactivity by providing some choices and options to our virtual participants. Really fantastic strategies and tips. And look, I think you've made some big fans here today by helping folks really to understand that there are different ways to support your virtual and digital community members to deliver a fantastic program that doesn't have to cost a bunch of money, doesn't require 2x the staff or effort to produce, and you can still meet and exceed the expectations of that very important part of your community, those folks who are going to engage digitally. So I know folks are excited. Leslie, you've been doing a lot of work in this field. I know you're one of the leading thinkers around not just parallel events, but different types of modality and how to structure and really deliver programs that are going to create value and success for clients. So as we look to wrap up our segment here, I know folks are going to want to reach out to you, find out more information, more of the work that you've produced on this topic. Where else can folks look to find more materials on this topic of parallel events or to connect directly with you?
So to find out more, we do have resources on our beedance website. We actually hosted an event around parallel events on one of our cadence episodes, which is up on our resources page as well. I also wrote a follow-up blog with it just to give a more expansive idea on what you would actually see in a parallel event, which is also available on our resources page. I am on LinkedIn, Leslie Bailey, and then I am open to getting email. I know some people would never put that out there, but I am. So it's lbailey@beedance.co. And I'm happy to talk through strategies or expand more on the idea of parallel events for anybody who is very new to the space. And this is an even newer term to them as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your generosity of spirit in terms of connecting with our audience. I suspect folks will take you up on that offer. And thank you again, Leslie, for sharing all your amazing perspectives on this really important topic as organizations are working through these transitions and changes and pivots and so forth, and trying to find that sweet spot of engagement that creates the most value for their stakeholders. So with that, folks, I'm Steve Boyce. It's been my pleasure to join you today. I want to thank again our very special guest, Leslie Bailey, Executive Director of Client Success with beedance. Please do take a few moments to reach out to Leslie and pick her brain on some strategies that might help you maximize engagement during your next event or program. And with that, we'll sign off for today. We look forward to seeing you next time.